But me, your man, Louie T. Welcome to this LouieTeeNetwork exclusive, The Reign of Terror, taking you through the 23 years of hell that previous Washington Redskins football team and Commanders owner Daniel Snyder has put this fan base through. So we are now into year, let's see, number 5. And this is 2003. And this is the second year of Steve Spurrier, the old ball coach here in Washington. We've gone through a number of changes. The first year of Spurrier was not as successful as most people had hoped. However, it was not the abject disaster that it was portrayed to be either. Now, you could see where this would have some issues, though. The whole Snyder-Spurrier marriage. First off, Snyder was back in the driver's seat after kicking Marty Schottenheimer out after the 01 season. And Spurrier really didn't give a damn about anything other than offense. We already talked about that. But there wasn't any talent on the team. That was clear after 02. And so what does Snyder do? Typical Dan Snyder fashion. He goes out and throws money at the problem. Okay? And so this was the season, for those of you unaware, that we call the JetSkins season. Why? Because you'll never see this again. This is something that I don't think you will ever see again in the NFL. It does not happen very often unless there's like a trade that facilitates this, where there's multiple players involved. But to sign guys as free agents from the same organization, Washington did not just sign one former New York Jet, not 2, not 3, 4 former New York Jets were on the roster for the Washington Redskins in 2003, who played for the Jets the previous year. Washington signed Randy Thomas as an offensive guard. They signed wide receiver Lavernius Coles to come over and be our #1 wide receiver, which was desperately needed. We signed John Hall, kicker, and we had all kinds of kicking issues and woes before Hall got here, so that was a big signing. And they also signed Chad Morton, who was more of a return specialist, but he could also be a third down back, but he was more of a kickoff and punt return specialist. That was his calling card. So they signed 4 former New York Jets. And so we were affectionately known as the JetSkins in 2003. So typical, Snyder, throwing money at the problem. Also throwing away draft picks. We only had 3 draft picks in the 2003 NFL draft. 3. All right. I think I can name them. It was only 3. So I know I can name 2. I don't know if I can name the last one. So Taylor Jacobs, and the only reason I can remember this so clearly is because of Madden. I was a game head in those days. So Taylor Jacobs out of Florida, go figure, right? Steve Spurrier would draft a guy that he coached in the collegiate ranks, and Taylor Jacobs. So, and we desperately needed receiver help, so I wasn't upset about it. So Taylor Jacobs was our 2nd round pick. We did not have a 1st round pick. Derek Dockery was our 3rd round pick, and he would go on to have a really solid NFL career, especially here in Washington as a guard. And we had one more pick. I can't tell you the round. I can't tell you the player. But it was one more pick. And it was late in the draft. It was like 5th, 6th, 7th round or something like that. Anyway. So we didn't have any draft picks. We're signing all these players like we always do in the offseason. And you go into the season, and a lot of people will tell you that Spurrier pretty much quit. Like mentally checked out after the end of player cuts, trimming the roster down to 53, and he wanted 2 guys in particular to be on this roster. He wanted running back Kenny Watson, who I told you was on the team the year before, but it's Kenny Watson. Like, what are we talking about here? And he wanted Danny Warfel, who I used to call Danny Woeful because he sucked. He wanted those 2 players on the team. Both of them got cut because, again, Snyder was in control of the roster. Daniel Snyder was. So both of those guys ended up getting the axe. And a lot of people felt like Spurrier at that point checked out mentally when he didn't get those 2 players on the roster. I don't buy that. I beg to differ. I thought 2003, and I just need you guys, because what I've realized in doing this series, there are a lot of you out there who are so much younger. And so you don't have a very good recollection or none at all of these, early Snyder years. And because of that, a lot of you, I feel so bad, and I feel bad for me. One, because I didn't get to experience those Super Bowls like some of the older fans did. But I feel even worse for you because you can't even remember that this was a not only respectable NFL franchise, you can't even remember that we were the gold standard NFL franchise. And when I say that, not just from a winning standpoint, because I sort of missed that. I caught the very tail end of that. But if you were to do an evaluation of the NFL teams back in 2003, this season that we're talking about right now, Washington would be number one, okay? Not Dallas, not the Giants or the Bears or the Packers or the Steelers or anybody else. Patriots now have all of a sudden shot towards the top of the charts. But back in those days, the Redskins were number one, and they had been number one for quite some time. It wasn't until we got to like 2005 that I think Dallas started to come, and it started to switch. Dallas and then Redskins, Dallas and then Redskins, and then finally we just fell off the map. Dallas took over, and then teams like the Patriots and things of that nature leapfrogged us, and then we're sitting at like number 6 or 7 right now. But once upon a time, we were number one. Anyway, so in saying that, we still didn't know that the dysfunction was as great. We were starting to learn that though, right? And we kicked off the season, and this is why 2003 was such a big season for me, because Ram was getting an opportunity. Patrick Ramsey, our first round pick from the year previous at the quarterback position out of Tulane, was going to get the keys to the whip in 2003. He was going to be the guy. And I was excited because I felt like Ram could play. And those first few games of the season in 2003, they were a lot of fun, man. So we start the season off. And this is how you know we were a big effing deal. And this is what I'm trying to convey to you so that it makes sense. Washington was the first Monday night game of the 2003 season. At home, hosting, of all teams, the Jets. Because we were the JetSkins, right? Getting Spurrier the year prior was a big deal. We were on primetime like 5 times that first year with Spurrier. It was a big deal, okay? We were a big deal. Adding a name like Spurrier was a big deal. You put the two together, and it's must-see TV. Some of that had, fizzled going into the second year, right? And not to mention you were starting a second-year quarterback. We had lost a lot of sizzle, but not to the point where we still weren't the opening game of Monday Night Football for the season. Like, think about this. If you put it in present-day tense, right? Would Washington ever be on Sunday Night Football, Monday Night Football, Thursday? Well, Thursday is usually reserved for whoever wins the Super Bowl, but we could be an opponent that game, right? If they want to throw up a tasty piece of steak for that team to devour, maybe. But would we ever be on a major primetime stage to kick off a season? Yeah, right. They're shoving us Arizona week 1, which I'm happy about, right? This upcoming season. But it might be the worst game on the week 1 slate coming up in 2023. Washington hosting Arizona. But we were on primetime television, ABC, 9 o'clock slot, hosting the New York Jets, and what turned out to be a very entertaining game. Now, it's 16-13, and it was a walk-off John Hall field goal for the win for Washington, but it was still entertaining stuff. But what that game was a precursor of things to come for Patrick Ramsey, because he got the living shit beat out of him in that first game of the season. He got sacked 6 times, I believe it was. Maybe it was 5. I vividly remember like 6 sacks in that game. Whatever. He got beat up. And the sacks don't tell the story. He got hit a ton. Now, it wasn't all his fault. I mean, it wasn't all the offensive line or all Steve Spurrier's fault. It was a combination of a number of things. Spurrier's play calling, which left him out to dry a ton. You know, we didn't have the best offensive line, nor blockers, or the scheme itself. And then Patrick Ramsey didn't do himself any favors. He would hold on to the ball way too long. Way too long. But that's nor here nor there. He got the living shit beat out of him in that season. And we'll chronicle that as we continue on throughout the season. But you get the win to start the season off 16-13. The next week, it's a fun one in Atlanta, in the Georgia Dome. We win a shootout. And this is when I was like, yo, P. Ram is the man. I'm telling you, he's about to tear this shit up. We go to Atlanta, and we're down 17-0 in that game. And I remember thinking we're about to get our doors blown off here. And somehow, before the end of the third quarter, I remember saying to myself, wow, this was a quick turnaround. You know, and the Falcons helped. You know, they turned the ball over. They did stupid shit. But by the time we got to the end of the third quarter, we had caught them. It was 26-24. I think we had gotten a safety. And then P. Ram throws a touchdown pass, and we're up 9 after trailing 17-0. We were up 9 in this ball game at one point in the fourth quarter, 33-24. And we end up winning that game 33-31, 33-30, something to that effect. So, and P. Ram went off 300 and something yards passing, you know, 2 or 3 touchdown passes in that game. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, they about to get some real P. Ram. The next week, he was outstanding against the Giants again. Unfortunately, we lost that game in overtime, and we had our chances. The Giants sucked. We had no business losing that game, but, you know, this has always been my thing, and I'm going to get to that in a second. But every game early in the season was super close, and really throughout that season, there are a lot of close ball games that we just didn't find ourselves on the right side of. That was one of them, right? So we're 2-1 at that point. The next week, we beat New England. And then I remember being excited about that because the Patriots were really good, right? The Patriots had won the Super Bowl the year before, and they were in the midst of winning. We didn't know at the time, but they were in the midst of winning, the Patriots had won the Super Bowl back in 2001. They were about to win it that year in 2003 and then again in 2004. And, you know, there was this thing back in the day that Washington would always beat the team that eventually would become the Super Bowl champions. And we've done that quite a bit throughout history, you know, especially in the 2000s in particular. Starting with the Ravens in 2000. We beat the 2000 Ravens in that season. Anyway, so we beat the Patriots with Tom Brady. Close game. I think we won by 3, like, you know, 17-14, 20-17, 20-14. It had to be 20-17 or 23-20 because every game in the first 4 or 5 games were like decided by 3 points or less. Like there were no blowouts. There wasn't even a touchdown difference in any of these games, right? Because the first game was 16-13. The second game was 33-30 or 33-31 or something to that effect. The Giants game was a 20-17 overtime game or 23-20. Overtime game, one of the two. And honestly, if the Giants won the toss and they just took the ball down, if we win the toss, we would have done the same thing and we would have beaten them. We had all the momentum going to overtime. It just so happened that they won the toss and our defense just couldn't stop them, and they ended up getting the game-winning field goal. Then we beat the Patriots the following week, you know, 20-17, I believe it was, or 23-20, something like that. So the defining game of our season to me was this week 5 matchup against the Eagles on the road. And I remember it vividly because it was the first time I felt like we had a chance definitively to crush an NFC East opponent when they were at their lowest point, and we failed to do so. Now, we'll chronicle this down the road, but we had the same opportunity to do that to the Giants. I want to say it was the 2007 season that the Giants started 0-2. They gave up like 80 points in the first 2 weeks. I think they gave up 45 and then 35 in their first 2 games. and we had them down like 13-0 at half. But we'll chronicle that game when we get there. The Eagles were, and I've explained this to you already. They were in the midst of the McNabb-Reed era, where they were dominating the NFC, not just East, but the conference. They were going to the NFC Championship almost every year. There was this run with Reed and McNabb from probably 02 to like maybe 05 or 06, where they were going to the NFC Championship every single year. And they were winning the NFC East, it felt like, almost every year. So they were in the midst of that. They had won the division the year before. They went to the NFC Championship game the year before. They didn't get it done, obviously losing to the Buccaneers, who ultimately went on to win the Super Bowl. But there was an opportunity there, right? So the Eagles were 1-3 coming into this game. And they were struggling, right? They couldn't figure it out. They couldn't get their footing underneath them. Here we are, 3-1. We're not just the best team in the division at this point, right? We're the best team in the conference, in the NFC at that point. And we're one of the best teams in football, 3-1, to start off the season. I mean, we're playing excellent football. Now, we're not blowing anybody out. And we're not dominant on any side of the football, special teams, offense, or defense. But we're finding ways to win. And then we go to Philadelphia, and we got a chance. If I'm telling you, if we beat Philadelphia in this Week 5 matchup, they're dead. They're 1-4. Their season's going to be done, and it won't go the way that it ultimately. Eagles end up beating us in this game, and they go on to win 11 out of their final 12 games of the season and finish the season at 12-4 and end up making it all the way to the NFC Championship game again. So it was frustrating, to say the least. This game had everything. The Eagles were not playing good football, and it showed in that game. It was a game that we easily could have won. We made so many mistakes. We did not play well, and yet you look up, and P. Ram, who had a horrible game, had gotten abused in that game, has the football late with the chance. We're down 2 scores, and he takes us down the field. We score a touchdown, or we get a field goal. It's one or the other. And then I think we were down 11. So he takes us down the field. We get a field goal to cut into the lead. We get a stop, get the football back. He takes us down the field with less than a minute to go, I believe. We don't use a single timeout. We only had 1 left. And he takes us all the way down the field into the end zone. Somehow the Eagles blew. They thought we were going to spike the ball. They blow coverage because they're playing cover 2. That's the Jim Johnson, back in the day when they used to blitz like crazy. So they're playing cover 2. The Red Sea parts down the middle of the field. Ramsey steps up, throws a beautiful lob job over the middle of the field to Darnarian McCants, who catches it in the end zone before taking a shot. But that cuts it to 2. All right, now we're down 25-23 or 27-25 or 29-27, something like that. We're down 2. I just know that. And so because we didn't use our final timeout, now we had a timeout to still use. So Spurrier burns the timeout, gives them extra time to draw up some crack on this 2-point conversion, and he sure dials up a beauty. We got Lavernius Coles wide open in the end zone on a pick play where you got Lavernius on the inside. He's coming in motion. And as he comes in motion, we snap the ball, and he goes and runs like a little quick speed cut. The receiver on the outside runs a slant, which is the natural pick you're looking for. They're playing man, and Lavernius breaks open to the corner of the end zone, and Patrick Ramsey airmails this thing over his head by like 4 yards. And I remember thinking somebody had to hit him. There was a hand in his face. Something. No, he just... And one of my biggest pet peeves with Patrick Ramsey, outside of holding on to the ball too damn long and doing stupid shit with it, is that he had this tendency where he would lock his front leg, right? Or he would lock his back leg, excuse me. And he would throw the football flat-footed for no reason. And every time he would do that, it would sail high on him. And in that particular play, he panicked. He had plenty of time. There was no defender. Like they sent a blitz though, but he panicked and he airmails it over Lavernius Cole's head. Would have tied the game. I'm not saying we would have won, but we had all the momentum. And Eagles hold on for the win. And I felt like that game broke us, and it propelled the Eagles to the season that they ultimately had. So the frustrating part about that particular loss is that we could have crushed the Eagles. And if we get to 4-1, I don't know what's going to happen. Patrick Ramsey still probably gets hurt because he was getting abused that season. But if we get to 4-1, I think it changes. A lot of those tough losses that we had might have ended up being tough wins where we end up on the right side of those, outcomes. But that loss, I felt like, propelled us to the doom that would then follow. And our season unraveled. Instead of being 4-1, we were 3-2. Instead of the Eagles being 1-4, they were 2-3. And the rest is history. We went in totally opposite directions. They ascended. Our season deflated. We lost a bunch of close games. Patrick Ramsey continued to get his brains bashed in. Then, it was the Tampa Bay game where we would later learn at the end of the season that Ramsey had injured himself in the Tampa Bay game. Like his foot, like either he broke it or he sprained, he did something to it. And the staff said he wasn't the same quarterback after that. Whatever. We weren't the same team after the Eagles game. We go that following week to Tampa and get our asses reamed. He gets hurt in that game, apparently. He never leaves the game. But, from that point on, he wasn't practicing during the week for the most part. He would just play, Matter of fact, I think he might have did that Eagles game. As a matter of fact, too, he had already injured his leg. He was getting beat up, man. The dude, when he got injured, he played 11 games that season, did Patrick Ramsey. By that 11th game, and a matter of fact, I remember this, it was a Sunday night game against the Dolphins that he ultimately gets hurt and ends the season. It's like the first or second possession of the game. He gets hurt on a stupid play where he just needs to throw it away, right? It's a 3rd down and goal inside the 10, and there's pressure on him. He's about to get sacked, and instead of him throwing it away, he tries to extend the play. The guy's got him in the grasp, and somehow he contorts his body as he's getting slung to the ground and throws the ball away, but in doing that, his leg gets like caught up under him and bent backwards and sideways, and he doesn't get up. And we had seen that picture all too often that year with Ramsey. After a play, he's on the ground, writhing in pain, as usual, because he's always getting hit. And again, not all of it is on Spurrier or the offensive line. Some of it is just him holding on to the ball too damn long. That was one of those instances. And he really was never the same after that. I liken him being Patrick Ramsey, to David Carr, the first quarterback in Houston Texans franchise history, #1 overall pick that year, out of the University of Houston. He could play. Like, David Carr wasn't a scrub. They got him beat up in his early years, specifically that rookie season. He got his ass whooped behind an inferior offensive line that, really had him seeing ghosts. Like, you're not the same quarterback when you take the kind of pounding that David Carr took in the 2002 season and the pounding that Patrick Ramsey took in 2003. You're not the same quarterback. Both of their careers, I thought, took a different path after those seasons that they took, respectively. But Tim Hasselbeck finished the season off. We were trash. We finished 5-11. We started the season off 3-1. And then after that Eagles loss, we proceeded to lose 7 out of our next 8 games. I really felt like that Eagles loss is what did us in. A lot of close losses in there. That Dolphins game on that Sunday night, we lose that game by 1 point. 22-21, 23-22, 24-23, something like that. And, you know, like I said, there's a lot of those close losses where it could have gone either way, but it just didn't go our way. And you'll hear Spurrier. I'm going to play you the soundbite from Spurrier on his way out of Washington, the last press conference he had as the head coach of the Washington Redskins. It's hilarious. It's one of the sound bites you hear all the time, or people like myself repeat. 5-11, not very good. All right. So Tim Hasselbeck finishes up the season. You know, it was a little conversation about could he be the starter? No, he sucked. And I mean, that was pretty much it for Spurrier, man. They fought hard, but it just wasn't enough. Laveranues Coles was outstanding that year. He actually made it to the Pro Bowl that year. He was one of the bright spots on the team, was Laveranues Coles. We traded for Trung Candidate. Remember, I told you when he had 3 draft picks. One of those draft picks was spent on trading for running back Trung Candidate from the Rams. His claim to fame is that he was one of the fastest men in the NFL at that time. I vividly remember that because on Madden, he was a 97 speed. All right. And back in those days, they weren't just giving away 97, 98s, and 99s and speeds. Right? You literally had to be that dude. Trung Candidate could run. Problem was, if somebody even looked at him, he'd fall down. So it really didn't matter how fast he was. You had to literally get him out in space on Madden and nobody touch him for him to score, for you to use that 97 speed. But, yeah, we did a lot of stupid stuff with draft picks. Obviously, free agencies, throwing money away that we didn't actually have. And, you know, Spurrier, you know what is crazy about Steve Spurrier? No, I don't think he was ever cut out for the NFL. All right. But if he were put in the right situation, I don't think he was a bad coach. Like, I think players would have enjoyed playing for him. And if he were given enough talent and a more stable organization, I actually think Steve Spurrier could have been successful. And I think that's really how a lot of these college coaches are. Like, if you give them the right situation, they can coach. It's not like they can't coach. The problem is they're so used to that college life that's ingrained in them. The NFL is just tougher. It's a grown man's business. It's a lot tougher than teaching kids and then having those kids turn over every 2-3 years. And so your message never gets stale. There's a different lifestyle that comes with being an NFL coach. You have to absolutely submerge yourself in football during the season, especially. Whereas in college, you know, there's still time for yourself and your family. Yep, there's recruiting and all that stuff in the off season, but you got other people that you can delegate that to as well. There's still a life. When you're an NFL coach, you really don't have a life. Football is your life. And not everybody's cut out for that. And I don't think Steve Spurrier was cut out for that, but I don't think he was a terrible coach either. Just don't think he was built for the NFL game. And you'll hear a little bit of that at the end when I play you the soundbite from Spurrier. But 03 was a disaster. It didn't start out that way, but boy, did it crash and burn epically. And it led to something that was, I think, the biggest surprise of the Snyder era. Every time Snyder hit a low point, and this was a low point, this failure of a hire with Spurrier, making him the highest paid head coach in NFL history at the time, 5 years, $25 million, only getting to the second year of that deal before firing him. This was a thing that was a common theme with Snyder, being impatient and impulsive as an owner, getting rid of guys. You know, this was the first rock bottom that we hit as a franchise with Snyder. This was the first one. Now, as we all know, there were plenty of more of these to come, but this was the first one. And every time we hit rock bottom, somehow he found a way to redeem himself. This was the biggest and best and most bold move that he could have made. And everybody that knows Snyder, that has sat down with him, says, look, he's a salesman. If there's nothing else he can do, he can sell you. Marty Schottenheimer, who swore on national television he could never coach for an owner like Snyder, sat down with Snyder And Snyder sold him on what being a Washington Redskins head coach could mean for him and his career moving forward. Sold him. Changed his tune. That's exactly what he's about to do now. And boy, as a fan that could remember the tail end of what were the glory years, and for any fan, you know, that was much older than myself, this was one hell of a rabbit that he pulled out of his hat heading into 2004. So I'll leave it there. I'll play you Spurrier's final, and this is epic. I'll play you Spurrier's final presser in Washington at season's end of this 2003 season. He would go on to be fired and return back to college football soon thereafter, but not before leaving us one final gem on the way out. And this would lead to Snyder having to go deep in his bag of tricks to pull out the biggest rabbit out of his hat. So that's going to do it for me, your man Louie T, here on the Reign of Terror, taking you down memory lane through the 23 years of pure, unadulterated hell that Daniel Snyder has put this fan base through. I'll see you guys next time. Have a good one.
Big crowd here. Hey, Frank. Hey, how we doing, my man?
Good, how are you?
Who's that guy with the Gator hat on?
Never remember it.
Yeah, Florida Gator guy. Got a big crowd in here. Okay, we wound up 5-11. Not very good. But there was some worse than us. I guess that's one positive way to look at it. We weren't the worst team in the league. But it wasn't very good. We're disappointed. And off season's here. So we'll try to regroup and try to make this team, this franchise better. The fans, Redskin fans deserve a championship team. They're the best. I've said that many times. They fill the ballpark, scream and yell, and even though we didn't play very well this year, I thought they were super. Redskin fans are best in pro football. That's my opinion anyway. Some guys had pretty daggum good years. I think our kickers, John Hall and Brian Barker, had exceptional years. They really did. And a lot of players played well. A lot of players. But overall, we simply didn't get it done. As coaches and players, we lose together. And certainly the close losses probably added up, and we didn't have much gas in our tank last night. So I really don't have a whole lot of great information for you guys today. Sum up the season. And obviously when you have a disappointing year, changes are going to be made. We all know that. And hopefully all the changes will be for the best interest of the Redskins. And Redskins be a stronger team next year. So when the changes are official, we'll let everybody know. But right now, really no official change in too much right now that I know about. So that's where we're at.